Welcome to our study on the book of Romans. This is going to be session 35 in our Sonship orientation. Even though we're coming back from the break, I don't think I'm going to need to do a lot of review to kind of get our minds back to where we were. I think what all I really need to do is go back to Proverbs 1 and read where we left off last time, and I think all of our thinking will kind of click in right there. So let's take a look at this, if I can get it. There it is. Proverbs chapter 1, beginning at verse 2. To know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, and judgment, and equity. Now, let me just pause here in the midst of this reading, and I want to just kind of set this up for you. We've been looking at to know wisdom and instruction, and the last time we were just getting into perceive the words of understanding. When you see verse 3, to receive, now that's different. Before it's to know something and to perceive something. Now you're going to get something. To receive the instruction of, and those four things there are the four parts of judgmental decision-making skills that you're going to be taught as a son right off the bat. You'll employ those not only in your everyday life here, but we'll actually practice those on each other. I mean, as members of this local assembly, you'll actually be putting those skills into practice here, in your family. If you're working, you'll do it at work. Whenever, in all of your relationships, you'll see opportunities to do that. And the reason I'm saying that's important, that I want you to understand that all the decisions that you can make in your life will fall under one of those four categories. That's why those words are broad. Those are very general. When you're talking about to receive the instruction of wisdom, that is a broad topic. To receive the instruction of justice, when you get to that, you're actually going to see that justice, that broad topic of justice, is going to get broken down into parts. And that's going to pertain to, this area and this area and this area. You'll see it detailed out. And then, of course, judgment and equity. All of those are decision-making skills. Now, you'll see when we get over there, you'll see that more clearly, but I kind of want you to have that in your mind. Now let's continue to read in verse 4. To give subtlety to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and will increase learning, and a man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsels. To understand a proverb and the interpretation, the words of the wise and their dark sayings. Now, we have previously spent time looking at what it means when it says to know wisdom and instruction. That is, in a nutshell, to know it exists and to know its value or importance. To know how important it is to your Father, so it'll be that important to you. And that was all given to you for a purpose. And what was that purpose? Why were you supposed to know wisdom and instruction? Because knowing that would set your attitude for the rest of your sonship education to say, this thing is worth my time and effort. This is something I'm going to stick with. This is a big issue. And when you see it for what it is, that's what takes you beyond that initial excitement of learning what it is that you're actually going to be getting. And you do understand that your inheritance is directly related to your being educated as a son. Now, that is vastly different than what most saved people believe. What do they believe? Most preachers, if you were to poll people coming out of church today, here in Monahans, I'll guarantee you, most people think, I'm going to be rewarded in heaven based on the good stuff that I do in my life. So when I was honest with my neighbor, or when I, did this to help these folks out, that's my reward. And I'm going to tell you, you already know that's not how that's going to work. Now, I was talking earlier this morning about, I was reading some old notes about where a guy had said at the judgment seat of Christ, things are going to be pretty warm. because of all those works that are being burned up. And really, that is the way it's going to be. All of that is going to be burned up. I know people are thinking, first of all, I don't want to leave that hanging because someone's watching the DVD here, and if they've just come into sonship and they miss sanctification, I just want to say, the things that we do are not done because we think they're good works that we're going to get rewarded for. What you do in your life has to stem out of who you have been made to be in Jesus Christ. That you really are a new creature. Remember, that's the thing. That's where grace comes into play. And when you live out of what God did for you and giving you this new identity, that's grace and that's something. But everything else is the flesh, and God utterly rejects that. So you already have an understanding that most people just absolutely don't have. But in knowing that you know this thing exists, and knowing that it's grand and glorious, knowing how important it is, that is not going to be enough to carry you through. You're going to need something more than that, especially in view of the fact that there are particular attractions and allurements that are going to be set before your eyes. All right, now, you know what? I'm going to stop. Because I'm saying it that way, but the way I'm saying it is almost like I'm going through the motions of it. I need to stop and say, we all, everybody here, everybody that listens to this on the DVD needs to understand you are going to be faced with allurements that try to steal you away from this sonship life that you're being offered. You are going to be offered attractions that are meant to get you to no longer have sufficient time to do this. And there's things that's going to compete for your attention and for your time, and they're going to be painted up so that they look much more attractive. And that's why it's important for you to nail this down now. That's why before he ever starts educating you, he is setting your attitude to say, this is how important this is. This is how big this is. This is how eternal this is. So that anything that comes along really does pale in comparison. I will tell you, that is not, almost every saved person would say it that way, but it doesn't really work that way in their life. They would say, I mean, I'm not shooting at anybody, but let me just give you this example. You know, we meet in the afternoons on Sunday. Some people are never going to come here for one reason. And you know why? The ball game starts at noon. And what they would say is, you need to shift that to a different time. You know why? Because there is something more alluring, something more attractive, something that has more meaning than this. And it's at this point I need to apologize to this group. And that is because when we left here before the break, one of the things I did, now we did both sessions, but remember I said, I don't know how we'll have to do those sessions because I have that call going on in the evening. This is the priority for me. You know, I thought about that when I got home, and I thought, why in the world did I even say that? Why would I even think that? Because I've already settled this issue. What I'm doing right here is the most important thing that I'm doing. If I do something else, it's only because it can be done in addition to this, not in the place of this. So I'm saying I should not have said it that way. I was really, I don't know why it came out of my mouth. If anybody had said, really? Is it that? I would have said, you know, it's not. I would have corrected myself immediately. But I guess I was thinking, I have these things happening, you know, and I guess and it just came out that way. But I don't know if you went home thinking anything about that, but I did. And I thought, you know, when I go back, I'm going to be, and I haven't thought about this since 2 weeks ago, but now that we're back and I'm thinking about it, I'm saying to you, this is what we do. If nothing else takes place, this is going to get done. And you need to know that. And that's what, as you have to make a commitment to learn it, I have to make a commitment to teach it. I mean, you have two commitments you're going to learn to make. You'll see that by the time we get to the end today. I have 3 commitments I have to make. Because I have to be committed enough to be able to show up here and do what I'm supposed to do. And at the same time, I've got to have both commitments you have in my own life going on. So I just want to say, I really have made those commitments. I really do mean that. And that's what will keep me until this group says, we don't want you anymore, and we don't allow you here anymore. Until that happens, I'm not going anywhere. You need to understand the level of commitment to that. It doesn't matter if a mega church up in the Metroplex says, hey, we want you to come here and teach sonship. Great. You guys willing to meet on Friday? Because Sunday, this is what's happening right here. This is what's going on. Because you've gone this far. I am not going to walk away from where we are to go start this thing over again somewhere. Does that make sense to you? Now that makes what I'm doing very different than that it has ever been before. Because before, I can honestly say I never went anywhere in ministry looking for a greener pasture. I did not. But I can say that there have been places I went and I didn't stay there forever. I might have been there for 10 years and then some circumstances happen and I go here or I go there. That can't happen anymore because now we're actually engaged in an ongoing education that has to continue. And so for me, that's a different thing. All right, now with that out of the way and my apology made, I even made it on the tape, so that's official as you can get, I guess. Following the Son, knowing how valuable this is. Following right on the heels of the Son knowing the value and importance of the education that he's about to get, in order to set the Son's attitude, the Father does something immediately. And what he does, now we did this just a little bit because we're actually not over there yet. But the Father takes the Son and he actually shows him something about the business and the Son's part in that business. It's not every detail. In fact, at that point, the Son couldn't absorb all those details anyway, because they require more foundation than just that. Because if he was told, the natural response would be, well, how am I going to do that? And how am I going to do that? And all that's going to be given to him in the education, given to us in the education. And we saw that a little bit. We saw that back in Romans 8 when we went back there and we just kind of skipped through very quickly some things about the creature. You remember? And some things that we're going to be doing in conjunction with that. Now, that was not intended to give you a full understanding of everything over there in Romans 8. We're not back over there yet. But I was showing you the thing you should expect is the very thing you do see happening there in Romans 8. As soon as you're told in verses 14 and 15 that you're sons and you've been given the spirit of adoption, he immediately turns around now and begins to tell you about the creature and the creature being delivered from the bondage of corruption and waiting for the manifestation of the sons of God and your part in that. See, and so that's following exactly what it ought to be. But before we move on from that, and by the way, that is designed to make your enthusiasm to know this not drop off and wane like a toy with the shiny that's worn off of it, but that is given to you to make your enthusiasm for this education to increase and it better. I'll tell you why. And that's why I'm dwelling on this now, because if we don't get started off on the right foot, getting our attitude set now, I promise you the policy of evil will derail us. So you have to set this in your attitude now about saying, this is how I value this. This is the priority that I'm giving to this. This is the commitment level that I'm making to this. Because those allurements and those distractions are going to increase. And you're going to have to be prepared to deal with that. Now, okay. As a matter of fact, you know, we saw that. What I was talking about when we went over and we saw that with the creature. We were looking at that. Well, anyway, I think you get all that. I think you kind of understand how all that works. So let's just look at this. Let me put this up on the board. You had level 1 of your education. You had phase 1 and you had phase 2. Phase 1 had 2 parts to it. To know wisdom and instruction. And the part 2 of phase 1 is to perceive the words of understanding. Let me show you where these happen in your epistles. This happens in Romans 8, verses 14 and 15. This happens in Romans 8, 16 to 39. So when we get back over to Romans, the reason I'm showing you the table of contents here is because when you get back to Romans, you'll know these 2 verses are designed to put this in me. These verses are designed to do this in me. And when you get back over to Romans, I won't have to remind you about Proverbs 1:2, because that is, by the way, all of this right here is Proverbs chapter 1, verse 2. That is everything in verse 2. So you'll see that happening right there all through Romans 8. And that is setting your attitude so that before you go to verse 3, remember those 4, to receive the instruction of wisdom and justice and judgment and equity. Those 4, well, those are the things that happen right here. And that is, well, let's just receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity. That's verse 3. And that's what, now, I know you're looking at this and there's a tendency to look at that and say, boy, I just can't wait till we get over there and we start learning that. We'll start learning how to think like our Father, and so we can make decisions like He would make. And I'm glad that if anybody's thinking that, I'm glad you're thinking that, and that ought to be attractive to you. But at the same time, I want to tell you that the tendency is to jump over this part to get over here. Because this is where you actually start the actual, open the textbook, start at lesson 1 and start going through the curriculum. And I know you want to become a simple son. And this is the thing that allows you to become that. But I want to tell you that you're going to find some exhortations that are given to you in the Bible that will not allow you to jump over this and get into this too quickly. Because if you get here before this really gets done in you, you will wreck your sonship education before it's over. Something will entice you away from that. Or you'll look at that and you'll say, look, it's almost... Let me chew that over. I look at this way. I'm trying to think of a way to say this. The only way I can do this quickly is to say how I perceive it. Because of what I see, I cannot imagine anything that would make me walk away from this. In fact, my commitment to this is because of what I see, okay? Because of what I see. if I didn't, and with all respect to the folks who have, you know what, they've set up their jobs and their homes and their business somewhere, and then they find out about this and they say, we don't have a church around here that, you know, offers us this. And you know what? The best they can do is follow us on the internet. And they do. And we have folks that follow us along on the internet. We've got a bunch of folks up in the panhandle of this state that follow us on the internet, that you know, kind of keep up with that, or get the DVDs. And that's better than, I'm going to tell you what, that's a lot better than nothing. But I'm going to tell you what I see in this. And I'm not, you know, no, I can't do that. You know what? Because I can't run the risk of becoming anybody's tutor or governor. I can't do that. I will just say it like this. This is of such value to me, I cannot see anything that will make me walk away from this. And I say that with the full knowledge of the list of things that Paul will give me in Romans 8 that says, here are the things that may well come your way if you persist in this education. And he warns you about it, warns me about it up front. And I know for a fact that God is not going to put his hand between me and those problems and stop them. There is a chance when it talks about persecution. We think of persecution today like, oh, well, somebody said something bad about me. But the Bible is talking about something different from that. When it talks about perils, nakedness, what would that be? Nakedness. What would that be? What would be the problem that you would be experiencing if that part of the Bible were to come true? In fact, look, let's just do this. Turn to Romans 8. Let me just show you this list. I know you're thinking you'd be having a mental problem, Brother Mike, if it was nakedness. That's the... Okay, but look, Romans 8. When he is talking about those things, look at verse 35. In Romans 8:35, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Now look at this list. Shall tribulation, or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or peril, or sword? What does famine and nakedness bring to mind? You would have some kind of a financial calamity, wouldn't you? That means, you know what? You might not have something to what? Eat, and you might not have something to wear. Do you realize, let me just paint this picture for you. So I'm not trying to talk you out of your sonship, but I'm trying to let you know that because I've come through this chapter and I have been faced with the possibility of all the, by the way, that last one, sword, that's talking about death. Now, he's not telling you what will happen. He's telling you the things that could well happen. They may or may not. And for all of us, it may be different. But I know that there is a distinct possibility that if we persist in this here, that it will come to a point where I'm going to have trouble being able to get groceries and provide for any kind of real living. I guess it would be me and that guy on the side of the road that pulls those two little carts. You've seen that guy? I'm thinking, you know what? 2 more carts, we'll just make a wagon train. I can see Billy up there now. Get up! All right. But you know what? I realize that that's a real possibility. He's not telling me it will happen, but what I'm saying to you is I have determined I don't see anything here that will make me say, I'm going to walk away from this. I'm not trying to be bravado. I'm going to tell you that I didn't come to that except through fear and trembling. Really. I can genuinely say that in my lifetime, I have not really been afraid very many times. I mean, I may have, you know, feared a circumstance or something like that. I mean, it's a possibility, but I mean, to really be afraid. But I want you to know that when I went through this and really did the work here, I got faced with the idea that that might really become a reality for me. That all big talk aside, and that was fearful for me, because I have a responsibility. And that made me think, not, is this worth it? But it made me think, I can't take this lightly. I can't just assume, oh, well, you know what? Just go ahead and bring it on because I can handle it. I know where I am in this thing, and I'll tell you now, if it wasn't for God making sure that the policy of evil could not exceed where we are in the education, we'd be in big trouble. But the point I'm trying to make to you here is, when Paul mentions all of these things, I'm just saying, we're going to go into this. Your Father's going to let you go into this with your eyes open. But it doesn't just end there. I don't want to bum you out, so I need to take you to the next verse, verse 36. For as it is written, for thy sake we are killed all the day long. We are counted as sheep for the slaughter. Look in verse 37. Nay, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him that loved us. How in the world can you be more than a conqueror when those things are happening to you? You want me to tell you what the Christian community would be saying to you if that were to happen? If because of that, you know what? If things started going badly and all of a sudden, you know what? You couldn't live in the manner to which everybody has pretty much become accustomed, and things were tough for you because of this sonship decision, I can tell you right now, our biggest critics would be saved people. I can tell you right now, they'd be looking and saying, you know what, you guys, that's what you, that's what God's doing. They don't even understand what God's doing in this age. They judge it all. Oh, you're getting blessed because you're doing good. Look at our church. We got a lot of money. We got a lot of people. Parking lot's full. We're not struggling to meet the bills. We got it all going. That's God smiling on us. And that's how they think God's working in this age. I got to tell you what, there's a drug dealer down in Colombia that has more money than any church in this state, and he's living high on the hog, and you know what? I guess he could claim God's blessing for that, huh? Because he's driving nice cars, got bunches of cars. Flies around and, does whatever he wants to do. Is that God's blessing? Well, of course that's not God's blessing. Well, wait a minute. How can it be proof of God's blessing for this one but not proof for that one? See, again, we're just superstitious in our beliefs. We don't have a biblical belief. Someone says, well, I believe God blessed me because... Here's all I'm asking. Will you please, in the epistles that apply to you, show me that in this book? That's all I'm at. Don't give me your experience. When someone says, I know God's done this or I know God's done that because I prayed and it happened. So did every Hindu, and so did every Muslim. What I'm asking for is not an experience. I'm asking for a verse that gives you the right to expect God to do that in this age. I just need one. You won't find it, but I'm not mad about it. I'm just passionate about it. You know why? Because I'm exasperated over the success of the policy of evil. And there are people that are listening to this right now on the DVD, and they're mad as a wet hornet. Because, I'm robbing them of the thing. You know what? Because they have a greater allegiance to what they want to believe than they do to the truth. But that's going to be their decision. I can't do anything about that except preach the truth about the thing. But I kind of got off the point here, so let me just get back here and to say that as you're coming through phase 1 and now we're moving into phase 2, there is a little bit of a difference. These are both meant to set the son's attitude. They are. They're both meant to show the son how important this is so that the son will make a commitment to the father that is commensurate with the father's commitment to the son. But I want you to notice that to know, remember we talked about that, to know is to know it exists and to know it has some value. But to know something, a step up from that is now to perceive something. This is very broad. To know wisdom and instruction. He didn't even tell you what that was. But now you're told to perceive the words of understanding. And that, it's not a huge step, but it is a step where the focus now has begun to narrow a little bit, and we're starting to get just a little more specific. Now, what I want to do is I want to talk about this word perceive. And to do that, I have a couple of books at home. I brought one of them just to show it to you. I have a couple of books at home. These are books on synonyms. And this is a book, this is written by George Crabb. It's called Crabb's Synonyms. And you want to be careful and get an early edition. This is like an 1837 edition. So you can tell it's old. It's got a lot of spots you can see on the pages. You know, it's an old volume. But here's the thing. There's another one called Smith's Synonyms Discriminated. When you get Crabb's and Smith's, these are men that wrote in the 1800s that understood two things. They understood the language, and they understood, I believe they understood a lot about the Scripture. And when they're giving you about what words are, they are giving you the way they understood these words when this book was put into English. So if you're looking at a word in your Bible and you really want to understand those, you know, like we did back in earlier in Romans, those shades of meanings to words, there was a time when people really did understand that. They just understood those shades of meanings. They're contained here. But you can't go today and get that. The only thing you can do now is go to maybe an Oxford English Dictionary, which has kept all of those old meanings, and as the word has gotten other meanings, they add them, but they always go from oldest to newest. And in Crabb's, he takes words that are synonyms, which mean they mean the same or about the same, and he takes them from the most general to the more specific. There's a way to do that. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because I want to show you something about this. I was talking about there is a difference between to know wisdom and instruction and to perceive the words of understanding. And I want you to kind of see how this is different. Now, I put this on the PowerPoint, so let me just get to it. Here's Smith's 1893 edition of Synonyms Discriminated. And I want you to notice what he says about perceive. We perceive external objects when the mind becomes aware of their presence by the senses. You understand? By seeing it or feeling it or hearing it, okay? And also perceive truths when the mind has been led by reasoning or otherwise to take cognizance of them. Now, I'm not trying to give you an English lesson, but notice that part that's in bold. He said, we perceive external objects. We perceive this podium when we look at it, or I put my hand on it, or you hear me slap it. We perceive it. But when you're talking about truths, in this particular case, we're talking about the truths that will educate us as sons. We perceive truths when the mind has been led. What a great way to say that. What does that remind you of? Yes, exactly right. And that's how we got here to Proverbs in the first place. And it's the next deal. For as many as are led by the Spirit. So when you go back to this and you say, when the mind has been led, in this case, because we're talking about the sonship curriculum, who's going to lead the mind? Yes! I thought, isn't that pretty amazing? That the very word perceive that's being used here to talk about and introduce that correlates exactly with what's being said here. And how is the Spirit functioning? As the Spirit leads your mind to be educated in this curriculum, He is doing that as the Spirit of adoption. It's about you being an adopted son. Gosh, that was just, I thought, that's just amazing to see how that went. I'm going to give you another one, and this is Crabb's. Now, that's this book, the 1935 book of synonyms. To perceive is to take into the mind from the senses. Isn't that kind of what we saw in Smith's? But he gives you an example. We see a star, for instance, when the eye is directed toward it. but we perceive its movements if we look at it attentively. Now, we're going to come back to that word, but I want you to notice, I skipped down to the end of it. He says, the blind cannot see, and the absent cannot perceive. I thought, how good is that? Now, that sounds like, well, that's an understatement. The blind cannot see. Well, I mean, that's true. But you know what you're told? You're not told to see the words of understanding. You're told to perceive them. How do you know what? You see it when your eye is directed toward it, but you perceive it if you look at it attentively. In other words, you ever said to your kid, pay attention. There's all kinds of things that people say. When Carl Baugh is teaching, he has this little deal when he wants to make a point. He stops and he goes, are you awake? Are you listening? And that's his way of saying what I'm about to give you is important. So when you look at it attentively, by the way, here's the word that's going to go along with that, because you're going to see this in the exhortation. He's going to tell the son to attend to da-da-da-da-da-da. And he's going to use that word attend over and over, over and over. If you're going to go through your sonship, you know what you're going to have to do? You're going to have to attend in more than one way. You're going to have to attend physically, that you're here, but you can be here and not be here. In fact, let me see where Smith was there. I thought I had enough. I guess I'm going to come to it later. But the body is present, but the mind is absent. That's not exactly the way I wrote it down, but it's something like that. Has your eye ever been looking at the words on a book, and your mind has been somewhere else, and you realize, I've read a page, and I have no idea what's on that page? Have you ever been looking at something in the car and you've kind of been watching the highway? Or I'll tell you one that happens to me a lot is I'm driving. I've done this in the past. I'm driving and suddenly I'm pulling in the driveway and I'm going, did I stop at that four-way stop? I don't even remember coming through there. Billy did that the other day. She said, did we already cross the Pecos? I said, yeah. She said, when? Just a while ago. You know, you're looking. All right. So there's two ways that attendance is going to happen here. Now, I'm not trying to use this to leverage anybody. Everybody's a son. They're going to do their own thing. Not my job to manage all that. Because you know what? Most preachers, that's what gives them ulcers. You know, I got to make sure everybody does what I need them to do. The only thing I can do is show you what your father is showing you. That either means something to you or it doesn't. After that, you know what? I can't guilt anybody into it or trick them into it. That's what people... Look, I just need to say this. That's what... There was a philosophy that I used to kind of buy into, and it was... do whatever you can to get people in the door, and then when they're there, you preach the gospel or do whatever, and try to hang on to them. I'm going to tell you, that doesn't work. And I have done that. I've spent a lot of time and effort doing that, and that doesn't work. We did that in Sanger. When I was pastoring a church over in Sanger, we averaged about 50 every Sunday. Bob, you were there. We did the averages for a year and a half, and we were averaging about 50. And what we were going to do is we were going to have a big day and try to let people know, here we are, this is what we're about, How can they know anything about us if we don't expose ourselves? So we're going to try to do this. So we promoted. We had this big day. We had a dinner on the grounds. We had ponies for kids to ride after it was over. We had all these little activities going on. It looked like a circus going on all over the church grounds. I mean, we publicized it. We put stuff out. We did everything. And we were going to try to have 300 that day. And you have to understand, and this old church was built back in the 1800s. It had a main floor. And it had these really neat pews. I'm not really a fan of pews, but these were really neat. This side, the pews were all curved. And they all sat one behind another in this curve. These were straight, and these took that up and made the curve around this way. So you kind of had this little bit of an arc in the pews there. They were just really neat. And they went back, and you had 2 aisles here, and of course the 2 outside aisles. And there was a balcony up on the top. And when you went up to the balcony at first, there was just an area that was about 6 feet wide that was a walkway. And I thought, well, that's not much balcony. If you only put 2 rows of chairs up there, but it went all the way across, and I thought that's not much. But it had 2 huge, I want to call them bay doors for lack of a better term. They were like a garage door. You pick it up, and there's big counterbalances up in the ceiling, and you could lift that up. And that was tiered, about 6 tiers back up in there. And what they had done is they had made that church where you could pull that down and then just open a door and go in, and that could be a Sunday school classroom. It almost looked like a college classroom with everything kind of built up as it went toward the back. And that way, when you open those up, people in the very back had a clear shot. Have you ever sat behind? You know, I always sat behind the tallest person on the planet, it seemed like. They were always right in front of me. But in this case, you could see over everybody. We worked and we had that big day, and we had over 300 that day. And I thought, this is, you know, when everybody was really excited, we reached our goal, oh, it was great, you know, we did everything we could do. The next Sunday, 50. Now, here's what I know. You say, and someone says, well, why don't you do that with Sonship? In fact, in Louisiana, I don't know if it probably doesn't stand anymore, but in the, let me get this straight. It would probably be in the mid to late 70s. The church I was at, we actually set the record, the church attendance record all time for the state of Louisiana. We had a big day, thousands. And we thought, you know, we'll do that. In fact, then I went down to Baton Rouge, and we broke that record by almost double. So, I mean, I know, if you're talking big day, I get it. I know what that's like. I know what goes into that. I know about the months of preparation. I know about handling traffic. I understand about all of that kind of business. But here's the thing. Someone says, why don't you do that to get people in so you can teach them sonship? Because sonship, the reason you come here, your attendance has to be honest. In other words, you have to be coming for what it is we're doing. If you're coming for any other reason, it won't work. It won't work. That's why if anyone is being drugged here kicking and screaming, it won't work. I will promise you there are no exceptions. It won't work for you. In fact, it's going to be difficult enough for someone who says, I want it, because of all the allurements they're going to try to bring. If this doesn't work in you, you won't make it. That's what happened to Solomon. God gave him that wisdom. You remember that? What was wrong with Solomon? He had a dad that taught him the education. What was Solomon's problem? His attitude never got set before he was presented with the doctrine. Now, he went through it. You're going to see it. It's there. But in his mind, it was, okay, let's get to this, let's get to this, let's get to this, let's get to this. And that's why we can't just jump this. You're thinking, perhaps, the most important thing that we're going to do, the most important thing that we're going to do is when we become a man of understanding. And it won't be. The single most important thing you'll do is this preliminary part to set your attitude, because that's the thing that will keep you in this all the way through so that you don't become a casualty. That's how critical this is. All right. So we're at a good point to stop here. And by the way, I'm going to show you something when we come back from the break that is absolutely going to shock you. It'll be hard for you to believe. I'm just going to expose you to it. We're going to talk about it. And then you'll have to go home. You'll have to mull this over. So you might want to bring your seatbelt back when you